Hey again, hope you guys are doing alright. It's week 37, is it? Or is it maybe even 38? I guess that isn't that relevant right now. I mean, you can see it right either there or there. So, you'll be able to answer that for me. Do you like my facial hair? I decided, and you probably saw it a little bit in the previous video, but I always hate these little bits. I get these little sticky out bits. But yeah, I haven't shaved or I haven't done my hair for ages. Because I've just been letting it grow, and then I said I'll cut it once I get my dissertation done. And it's still not done. I've still got a little more time until I get it done. It's going okay. It's alright. Tonight I need to write about 1,000 words, and then I need to edit back the introduction. So what I need to do is currently I'm so right at this moment I'm reading about Ivan Jablonka's History of Masculinity, and I've just been keeping. That's where what I do because I don't actually fully read books. What I do is I go to the index. So firstly I'll look up like summaries and stuff online of the books, and then once I get a kind of vague idea like that, I'll also read the preface or the introduction, because they typically tell you this book is going to go over these things, and then I think about the things that are important to my essay, and I'll turn to the index, and I will look through the index, and I will find the particular words that are associated with my work, and then I will go to them and I will read those, and then I will then typically just get engrossed in the book or whatever it is, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I really want to read this, and I'll spend a lot of time just reading these things. So I've got one which is connected to the index, and then another which is connected to the actual bit I was reading, and then on another piece of paper I then write down. Don't know if you can see that, but yeah, I write down the thingamajig. Should be okay. Yeah. So that's what I've been doing, and what I've got to do at the moment is, so currently my dissertation is about masculinity, and it's about what actually is masculinity. I'm comparing Deida and Judith Butler, and it's kind of hard to, because essentially philosophy, in my idea of what philosophy is, it's about what exists, what we like. It's what exists, what we know to exist, and then what we should do about existing, which is metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. And then obviously each of these cross over in between one another, the ethics of believing in what exists, or how, and then obviously how metaphysics influences ethics, and if you think certain things are inevitable, then you might make a virtue out of necessity, etc., etc. And the epistemology obviously dictates what you think is valid as real information or fake information, is going to determine what you then think is, your ethics as well, or it will influence the type of choices you make, etc., etc. So that's the way I see it. I see a philosophy as being this, and then I think that inside of that, philosophy is, in the Deleuzian sense, philosophy is about creating concepts. And so for me, I look at Judith Butler's view of the concept of masculinity, and I'm looking at David Deida's viewpoint of masculinity, And I'm saying, right, what are these different concepts? What are their epistemologies, metaphysics, and ethics? What is it that the authors describe in the world, and what do they say exists? And then what do they prescribe from that, or what are the normative statements they make? What is it that they say that we should do from saying what is? And so it's interesting because David Deida is really not bothered about talking about what actually exists, and or like he doesn't care about actually justifying his viewpoints and explaining them. He's very much just focused on telling you what it is, particularly in a book like The Way of the Superior Man. Whereas Judith Butler is completely opposite. She wants to describe and she wants to deconstruct, as she says, genders and sexualities and masculinity and femininity and all this. But she doesn't want to actually prescribe anything because she wants. It's almost as though she's like bringing like a massive sledgehammer to these concepts, and she's wanting to destroy them. Essentially, like I guess a bit like Nietzsche. And you can almost think about this as like a way of like if there was a huge concrete slab on the ground and there's this nice little field or something and there's concrete all over it. Judith Butler's point is to just sledgehammer and deconstruct it in a very messy way like that. And so then the things underlying it can, they'll be arid, if that's the right word, but eventually they'll recover and they'll go back to how they were. So that's her viewpoint. It's almost like she doesn't want to say like, oh no, masculinity is stupid, but you should do this instead. She's saying, what is this? This doesn't seem like it makes sense, and then just leaving it there. But it's in the hopes that you will then go and engage and figure out what you want in your own life, and what new identity you're going to create. So currently at the moment, I've now then decided to use Jablonka and bell hooks as people who prescribe some form of masculinity. They prescribe some idea of what it is, as a means to sort of contrast David Deida's viewpoints, which are very much more they're much more conservative, but at the same time it's really interesting. It's like he reinvokes the gender binaries without the gender. He does. Judith Butler in her book Gender Trouble critiques heteronormativity. What that means is like how heterosexual like relationships is seen as the norm, and then she points out that like in gay couples and stuff, the heteronormativity is applied to it. So it's thought, like in a gay couple there's still one person who's like more feminine, and then there's one person who's more masculine, and then the unity of the differences is the result of a sexual polarity, as David Deida would say. But her argument is something like, I don't actually know what really her argument is, but essentially she's saying, oh no, this isn't the case. Like heteronormativity isn't actually the case that's going on here, which I don't really understand. That's something I still need to see. But for instance, that's the way that they contrast. David Deida's points are far more like, they're far more embedded. It's like he takes this heteronormativity, but then like spiritualizes it. So he says that sexuality isn't related to gender, or it isn't related to biology. No, really, in existence, there's only people like who are just more feminine and people who are more masculine, and they will just naturally find each other. And the people who are mixed will probably find people that are mixed because they're on the same level as them. And so, it's kind of quite interesting like this. It's interesting because, so many things I've been reading in these books reiterates what David Deida says, but they reiterate it from the outside and are very critical of his type of reading. And it kind of makes me question my own one. And the problem, it seems as though it's almost like you're having to choose between being absolutely directionless and not really knowing where you want to move and where you want to go because you don't know what your identity is anymore. With the case of like Judith Butler or something. Or it seems like your viewpoints of expression can be channeled into this specific way, where you have a very particular direction, maybe this big, maybe that big, maybe even this big, and it's really restrictive, but because you don't have to think about all these factors, you can actually get on with things and you can actually go and do great things. You know, like in just the same way that if you give yourself so many distractions, so many things to do, and you don't prioritize certain things, you end up doing nothing really. The same is like said in this idea of identity. If you do just, on the one hand, if you do just solely make your identity about something, then it's very easy for it to fall apart. But on the other hand, if you make it about everything, then you don't do anything. And so, and moreover, there's another dynamic, which is like that David Deida's viewpoints kind of, they reiterate already what is the case in society. Whereas Judith Butler's obviously is very critical and is wanting to dismantle society. So it's also another question of, well, like, what's your political leanings? Do you think that the best way to live life is to conform into what is given in society and just make peace with it and flourish because trying to change society is too much? Or do you try and change society and change gender roles and gender norms? So that you can, fit into something more. So yeah, those are the elements of the kind of discussion that's going on. And at the moment, I'm just writing about Jablonka and Bell Hooks' views of masculinity, because unlike Judith Butler, they actually prescribe some kind of form of masculinity. So I'm writing that now, and then I'll then have to write critiques of Butler, Jablonka, and Butler, Jablonka, and Bell. Which will probably be about 1,000 words. And then on top of that, I've then got to rewrite the introduction. And then from after that, I'll consolidate it and then I'll send it off to my lecturer. And then while my lecturer is reading through it, I will then work for the next 2 days on the conclusion, which is the kind of putting together of these two viewpoints. My whole thing's structured in the sense of, one, there's an introduction that just explains, men are in a confusing state at the moment, so what can we do about this? Then this is David Deida's point of view. This is an internal critique of David Deida's point of view. So that's a critique from just general critiques against him. This is Judith Butler's point of view, plus Jablonka and Bell Hooks. This is the criticisms that people give of their works. And then lastly, but this is them talking to one another, in my essay, obviously not really, but what are the criticisms they'd each give each other, what are the approaches that each one would, and what are the viewpoints that each one comes to, and then if it isn't philosophical enough, then I'll include perspectives such as utilitarianism, Kantianism, Nietzscheanism, or Nietzscheanism, Nietzschean critique, providing an amoral perspective, which is also still moral, a consequentialist perspective in the utilitarianism, and a deontological perspective in Kant. Spoiler, utilitarianism is cringe and Kant and Nietzsche are cool. But yeah. What else? Yeah, okay, so my conclusion will consist of just how they would respond to each other, potentially then how Kant and Nietzsche and utilitarianism would read each of them, and then some kind of conclusion where I'm like, what are their similarities, what are their differences, what type of, how should we move forward, how should we treat the concept of masculinity in the future, if we are to get better as a human race. So yeah, that's what I've been doing at the moment. Now, realistically, I wasn't actually really wanting to talk about any of that, because I actually wanted to talk about something else, which I'll talk about now. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. Concerning other stuff, and I'll make this social life. Haven't done anything since I've literally just been staying inside. What's it called? Physically, still haven't really been doing much. I have, as you'll be able to see from my physical physique, pulled to Canada as well. It's not the best. I have been doing a little passage though. But yeah, this is what I look like. Probably looks exactly the same as I did last time. I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit more muscle, but like microscopic amounts. Yeah. Financially, still in the same position. And mentally, still in the same position really. Doing a bit better, feeling a little bit better, but that's it really. So yeah, everything's basically the same as it was last week, and I haven't really been able to work towards anything apart from just doing meditation really. The real thing I actually wanted to talk to you about though, now 17 minutes and 40 seconds into this video, was the idea of the femcell. And the femcell, I think, is pretty crucial in understanding how to be good with women in a way. Or it's crucial, but with all these things, there isn't just one element. There's many different elements that are involved in getting good at anything. But I think this is a good one in understanding women. So, the femcell is a feminine person, typically woman, who is celibate. And there's a big discussion, particularly in incel circles, about how a woman can't be an incel. Funnily enough, the idea of the incel was generated by a woman, which is funny in itself. But essentially the argument of the incel is, and you've probably already seen this argument online, but you might, if you're watching this, then you probably know of Modern Wisdom, Chris Williamson's thing. He did a short clip on this, but the femcell is a woman who is celibate not because she can't get laid. She could go out to any club and probably throw her body up against someone, and at some point someone's gonna get with her. But the point is, who wants to do that? Who really wants to lower their level of dignity to that? Why do you want to just kind of keep on putting yourself out there in a way until someone recognizes, until someone, I don't, maybe this is actually probably a bad way to look about it, but the argument is, sorry, I've been very unstructured with this. But the incel argument, is that a woman can never be an incel because a woman has always an opportunity to have sex with someone. She can go to a club and get with someone there. She could be, walking down the street and start a random conversation with a stranger and likely kind of be able to arrange a way that they could get with someone. But this ignores a key thing about women, which is that women are typically, and if I'm excluding, I'm sorry about this, but typically women are a lot more cautious about who they give themselves to, in a way, who they allow to be able to be intimate with them. Coach Corey Wayne says that guys are like dogs and women are like cats, in the sense that a dog, a guy sees a woman or someone he likes, and he's going, oh, I like her, she's good, or I like him, I want to go and talk to him right now, oh, wow, one of these things. And typically also probably has that with potentially with more people, or maybe not even potentially with more people, but there's a much more desire to actually go and talk to them, to go and interact with them and stuff. Whereas women are more like cats. They will see people they find attractive, but they'll be thinking, oh, well, I've got this thing that I need to do, or oh, no, I need to go and do that thing, or oh, well, how do I know that he's really that good? The way I've liked to think about it in a way is that it's typically the things that make men and women different, and by this I don't mean actual, it doesn't have to be biologically, or it doesn't have to be gendered. What I mean is, the thing that makes someone more masculine and someone more feminine is that a person who's masculine underthinks, and a person who's feminine overthinks. And in that way, maybe there's some kind of connection, and that they help supplement each other in a sense. But yeah, typically, men just don't really consider anything. They just think, oh my god, but a woman is wanting to be more cautious. If a woman can go out to a club and she knows for sure that she can get any guy, again, that doesn't really hold any value. It's like knowing you can go down to the supermarket and not only get, but be given a chocolate bar. There's nothing you have to work for there. There's nothing that it doesn't really show any perceived value. And so if you're gonna put yourself out there, and if you're gonna have sex with someone, you want it to be someone of high quality. You don't want to just go for someone who's lower in your opinion, from your perspective, in life, or someone who's less compatible with you. For a lot of people, and especially also for men who actually get pretty good at being with women, sometimes it can just seem pointless and vacuous to just go and fuck people for no reason. I know I kind of I haven't slept with very many people at all, but I've known that this, if you have had someone that's been interested, you have been interested in them, you don't want to give yourself over and your time and your life and give other people hope if you don't like them, and that isn't to say that you should be rude and disrespectful to people, but you don't have to give your time and your livelihood over to other people. And so yeah, that's the thing that the incel misses. The incel is probably too, or just even if you're not an incel, but if you're just a guy, you might be too invested in just needing some kind of ego boost, thinking that people desire you in some way. Whereas, because women already have that fulfilled, They want the deeper thing. They don't just want to be desired. They want to be desired by someone they who see as really good. Yeah. So I think that's probably one of the keyest points that people forget. I guess particularly men forget about women, is that they're cautious. They want to be sure that they're going to get someone who is, of good quality to them, from their perspective. Again, they won't really think in these ways of saying like, oh, higher or better value or any of these things. And these seem really like, markety. I guess that's a consequence of thinking of things like in this kind of capitalist market ways. But essentially it's the same kind of thing of like, she wants to know that she's with someone who she can vibe with really well. And that requires a guy who's confident and who's free in being himself. Because you can't really vibe with someone who's closed off. And us men like look at these things and then think, oh, well, there's higher and lower values, but really it's just that she wants to be with someone who's like stable, who like engages her and like gets her emotions going, who's strong, like emotionally, and can hold her, not in the sense of enclosing her, but in the sense of giving her a space that she can emotionally and like she can emotionally express herself, creating a space psychologically that she can express everything that she feels, and she knows that you'll be strong enough to be able to observe it all and to look after it all. I forgot what my main point here was. That was it. My main point is that if you're going to be good with women, you've got to think like a woman. Not in the sense that you should focus on thinking more about your emotions and stuff. Not that all women obviously think in terms of primarily their emotions. This is talking in general terms again. If you're going to be with someone who's feminine, then you should consider that they get plenty of people. So you should act the same way. You should always be cautious. You don't have to really, put yourself out there and like really go like really up to them and stuff. You can just go about your life being pretty happy and productive and not stress over these things of, oh, was she looking over at me, or and just think to yourself, I've got my own things going on, like, there's an abundance there. Like, I don't have to stress over these little things. I don't have to worry about whether I should go and talk to that person or not. I should just go and talk to them. Like, you can go and talk to someone, but then not really expect anything else back. When you think that there is always an opportunity for you to kind of get what you want, then you don't really need to take that up. You can just spend your time going, oh, well, I'll just go and talk to them. I'm not hoping anything comes of this, because, if I probably have the ability to. Now, obviously, you can't just lie yourself into these things. You probably actually need to get good and valuable. Valuable? Yeah. Valuable in the way that we're talking about it. Not that all humans have an inherent value that can be universalized, but in the sense that you can appear more valuable and to some people than others. I said this in a convoluted way, and I almost guarantee that I will say this in a much more coherent, scripted way at some point in a much higher quality, much more high quality video. But in order to get women, you need to think. In order to get women, but more feminine people, you need to think like a woman. You need to. Well, in this case, you actually need to think like a woman, because most women do get approached by many, many guys. Most women then don't think about these things too seriously. They don't put too much value on other guys liking them. And at least from my own standpoint, I think I put quite a lot of value on people desiring me. We should be able to have our own, we should be able to fill ourselves up so that we can still appreciate when others value us. We can understand it gives us an ego boost, and we can feel good about that. We can understand it's just an ego boost, and we should work and have a relationship with ourselves where we treat ourselves with enough respect that we do what deep down we desire, and we discipline ourselves in the sense that we choose to do that thing that we desire more than the things that we choose that are lesser desires. And we should be able to fulfill ourselves up in that way and be able to put ourselves out there here and there, slowly building up more confidence and training ourselves more and more in social settings, when we're friends, when just expressing ourselves in general, when pushing ourselves at the gym, when taking that little bit more uncertain route in our finances that can, provide us with better. We can respect and accept that we get an ego boost when others desire us, but we don't need to. We can think to ourselves that, well, when I'm like that, I already am desired in a way. And if you're not, you got to be realistic with yourself. You got to be truthful with yourself. But and then you've got to build your own respect with yourself. So then, when you think about yourself, your self-reputation is high, which is self-esteem. Self-esteem is self-reputation. So yeah, I guess then the methods to do that are, for instance, like Nathaniel Branden's The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem. And I guess it's like engaging with works like Lao Tzu's. It's thinking about great men who embody these things. So, for instance, I've mostly been at the moment thinking about Uncle Iroh from the Avatar: The Last Airbender. In my weaker moments, I've always worried about things like Buddhism or particularly Taoism, concerning how in my weaker moments they seem to be philosophies of renunciating. Well, maybe Buddhism is, but Taoism is. It's always seen as like a philosophy of renunciating your desires. But it's much, at least in the way that, for instance, Stephen Mitchell writes about the Tao Te Ching. It's an unexplainable way in which not desiring a thing actually leads to the desire being fulfilled, which is incredibly paradoxical, and it's incredibly confusing, because then you think, I don't know. It's a confusing one. But it's just, I guess, like an infinite trust in the world. But yeah, if you want to attract women, then think like a woman. Know that you've got plenty of options. A woman knows that she's got plenty of options, and that one slip up here and there with someone isn't going to do much. She isn't going to sweat over the small stuff, and she's going to look for the people who... She's going to focus probably more on her career, knowing that at some point a hot guy is probably going to come round. And likewise, we can kind of do the same. At some point we are going to find someone who's good, and then we then need to be the gentleman and all of that stuff. But we should approach the world as though we are a woman in that way. In this particular way. Anyway, I hope you guys are having a good time. Love you all, and see you next week.